Hi there, I'm Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, Gothi of the Ridgar folk here in East Texas, and I would like to welcome you to the Raven's Call. This is a show where I ramble on about different heathen-related subjects, just kind of whatever strikes my fancy at the time, sets my mind on fire. Obviously, we do a lot of Heathenry 101 kind of stuff on here, but we also like to venture off into some of the more esoteric or advanced areas from time to time. Now, big UPG warning at the top of this because I feel like it's necessary. My philosophies, my approach to heathenry, this is just what you're going to see on this channel. It's the big UPG warning, unverifiable personal gnosis for those that know. And everything on this channel reflects my views, my take on heathenry, and isn't even necessarily reflective of my own tribe, let alone the views of greater heathenry in general. So, as a whole, just take this for what it is. It's my talking points, my point of view, how I see the world, and hopefully, will encourage you guys to think about things maybe in a different avenue, help you develop your own ideas, and help you to build your own personal worldviews, and maybe spark some critical thinking, some questioning, things like that. Just good conversations and whatnot, and I always enjoy that. I always like to hear, and so I really like it when in the comments people jump in and can share, how their tribe does things or how their family, their hearth does. It's kind of neat. So anyway, if you guys like the videos, please hit like, subscribe, all that stuff down in the bottom. I really appreciate it. It's helped out with the videos, getting them out there and everything. At the time of this recording, we're at about 1.6 thousand subscribers, and so cool. Thank you guys. That's awesome. I appreciate it. I love it. It's fantastic. Also, Heathenry 101 has broken 6,000 views. That is ridiculous. I cannot even express how awesome it is that one of my videos has been at least clicked on 6,000 times. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always been watched through, but it's been clicked on, and that's cool. Now, retention rates will reflect that it's only people watch it in chunks, and then some people click it and then click off of it. Other people watch it all the way through. It's not for everybody. Just the fact that it's been clicked on that many times is really neat, really cool, and it means it's getting around. So I appreciate it. Appreciate your support, guys. You are fantastic. You're a great follower base, and I cannot express enough how much I appreciate it. So thanks, guys. Now, on to today's subject. This is another one that was born from a conversation out of the comments. No, not in the comments. This was a message, a direct message from an individual who I'm not going to name on here because I haven't cleared with him to shout out his name on the channel or not. But he was asking me some particular kind of background mechanic type questions on heathenry, at least a couple. And one of the questions that he asked me, and I realized I hadn't done a video on this yet, is what is the difference between a world accepting and a world rejecting religion? What makes these two philosophies significantly different? What does it even mean? And how does that play into heathenry today? Now, those aren't all of his questions. Those are other questions that I've had other people ask me, and it's all been kind of amalgamated into one. But he did launch off the whole world accepting versus world rejecting idea. So he knows who he is. He's going, he got my question. Yeah, anyway, I told him I was going to do a video on it. Anyway, so the gist is this. These two particular philosophies are polar opposites in how they view this life, the now. What we as heathens would refer to as Midgard Vertandis realm, the here and now. This world, this life, this existence. How do we view that? Now, you'll especially hear some people like with theology backgrounds and stuff throw these terms out. You'll hear them say that heathenry is a world-accepting religion, that things like Christianity and some of the others are world-rejecting religions. And they never really explain what that means because people that are into the philosophy side of things or the theology side of things tend to get caught up in the terminology and don't always stop to explain the terminology for those people that are sitting around and listening. They either assume you're going to go and look it up, or you already know. So that's they just don't slow down enough to explain it. And I get that because it's very difficult to have a conversation when you have to stop and define terms along the way. I still do it, but that's because you guys know me. I ramble and I teach and all that stuff. That's what I do. So that's just kind of part and parcel for me. So anyway. World-accepting religion. Let's look at heathenry, all right? Heathenry, as a world-accepting religion, focuses all of the crux of existence on the here and now, on this life. we live and we die here. You guys have hopefully by now watched my stuff on the soul complex, gotten an idea of how I feel in the afterlife and things like that. And ultimately speaking, the focus of life is here. All of the research that we've shown and everything, there's the whole Valhalla, die in battle, go to Valhalla thing, which is all very brosatru, very, very hardcore Viking, warrior cult kind of stuff. Not that I equate brosatru with warrior cult. The two are separate. Warrior cult is extremely important. But they understand the truth of the whole Valhalla thing versus the more brosatru side of things, which is very, very fluffy bunny, very superficial. Anyway, looking at all these things, you will see that there are some focuses on the afterlife in specific elements, but they tend to be fairly vague, and it's like the main thing as far as arch-heathen times was going into the mound and going back to the ancestors, joining the ancestors at table and feast, becoming spirits in the land. But all of that's still very much tied to the here and now on how that plays out. You talk about like when you die and you go into the mound and you become tied to the grave, you tied to the underworld, you're still tied to the profane world. You are still tied to Midgard. You may be in the spirit realm of Midgard, but you're still in the profane world. You're still in Midgard. You are still interacting with the here and now as an ancestral spirit. It's just how you continue focused on the here and now. Okay? It's focused on this world. Additions, and see, this is where we get some discrepancy in later understandings for people that don't really get the whole world accepting versus world rejecting elements, because they'll look at like the Valhalla stuff and some of the others that have been subject to syncretism over time and try to use that to color how like arch-heathens thought about life. And it's erroneous because it doesn't follow necessarily their heathen worldview. They're trying to use world-rejecting ideology from a world-rejecting base philosophy to define terms and context within a world-accepting religion and philosophy. It's an apple trying to describe an orange but not having a common language. It just doesn't play out right. The two are very different things, and therefore, an orange looking, an apple looking at an orange and trying to describe an orange but not having a separate word for it would say it's a not red apple because it doesn't know what an orange is. So that kind of thing, it can only describe it in terms of what it knows of itself. And so a world-rejecting religion would describe heathenry within the context of world-rejection philosophies because that's what they know and that is their worldview. Similarly, world-accepting religions have a hard time understanding world-rejecting religions because we just don't think that way. And it's a significant difference in philosophy. It's a significant difference, even though it seems to be a minute thing. Seems to be. All right. So a world-accepting religion or philosophy accepts that this is reality, that this is the primary existence. This is the real world, okay? Real, like in capital and quotations. It's a very significant term when we're talking about this is reality. This is the crux. This is Earth Prime, Midgard Prime, whatever you want to call it. This is it. This is existence. We exist here and now. We only exist in the construction of soul elements that we do right here and right now for our existence and period of time. All of the orlog and everything that has led up to here and now is being fed by our weird and our future vectors. I got some really interesting ideas on conception of time and relativity within relation of kind of heathen worldview. I haven't been able to put that together in a video yet because it's still kind of wibbly wobbly up here, but I've got some really cool stuff I want to share sometime. Anyway, here and now is the focus of it. We focus on the luck in the here and now. We focus on our relationship with the gods, the here and now. The gods exist in mythic time, sacred space, which is a different perception of time. We as heathens here and now, have no access to the past save our orlog. We have no access to the future save our actions and deeds as we build a vector towards Schultz's domain. This is all we have. This is all our reality, and this is what we exist for. So we try to live our best life in this life because it's what we have. We're not guaranteed anything on the other side. We don't know anything for certain on the other side, other than the fact that we'll go into the mound and something's going to be there or something won't. But the general thought is that we rejoin our ancestors at table within the underworld, and our spirit becomes reincorporated with the spirit complexes of Midgard in general, tied to location, space, time, all of that stuff. All of this plays in and is within the world accepting philosophy, the world accepting standpoint. Okay? Pause. Let's move over, not like an editing pause, but just a pause that point of conversation. Let's talk about world rejecting for a minute. And world rejecting is exactly the opposite. Well, okay, not exactly the opposite, but it takes a different approach. To them, this is not the real world. This is the staging area to prepare for the real world. If you've got something like Buddhism, where in certain branches you get the whole reincarnation, nirvana seeking aspect where you seek the release, the oneness, etc., etc., etc. This is not the reality of things necessarily. You're seeking a release from that, an ascension from that. And Buddhism isn't necessarily the best example of that because you'd have to really break down on where their focus of the real versus the, how nirvana plays in. But nonetheless, Christianity, of course, is probably the one that most people pull to because it's the one that most people have the experience with. So we'll talk about it in terms of that, all right? Now, from Christianity, this world is a testing ground, a staging area, as it were, for the real life, the real reward, what I've heard them refer to as their true lives, and that is in the afterlife, or in heaven, or in hell, or however it plays out based on the specific philosophies. I'm not intimately acquainted with because that wasn't my culture growing up, so I don't know all the nuances. But generally speaking, the focus is on the afterlife. The real deal begins, eternity begins in the afterlife, versus a world accepting, which the real deal is the here and now. Okay? So the reason to do good, the impetus to do good in a world accepting religion is that this is all you have and you need to protect it while you have it. You need to be good to other people because this is all there is, and we need to be good while we're here to make the best of what we have. Okay? On this side, on the world rejecting side, the reason to do good, the impetus to do good, is to gain acceptance and a place of honor in the true afterlife. Do you see the difference here? This is, in a world rejecting philosophy, the here and now, the profane, is thought of as less than. It's thought of as dirty, as it were. Not necessarily. I mean, that's in the gritty kind of, pure, light, clean, gritty, street kind of thing. You're wanting to ascend to the higher place, so you have to do what you need to do here to get there kind of thing. And it's trying to get away from this life but towards that life, with the understanding that there's no shortcuts through this life to get to that life. Ergo, you must live out this life and live it well in order to get entry into your true life, the afterlife, the eternal life. You get it, I think, I hope. So that's world rejecting philosophies. This world they reject as reality, and they accept the afterlife as reality, within the context of kind of that Judeo-Christian kind of construct. Okay. Now, heathenry. You can see how heathenry is different than this, though, right? Because we're not seeking the afterlife, per se. We're seeking the here and now. We're seeking Gefrain and luck, perseverance, well-being, etc., 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 not trying to gain access to some mythical afterlife. And this, I think, is where you will see the syncretism come into play when talking about Valhalla. Okay? Now, Valhalla is a thing that requires a great deal of research to fully understand. Because, yes, the Eddas mention gaining access to Valhalla for, warriors and those that are slain in battle, those that die with sword in hand, etc., etc., etc. A lot of that is late edition stuff. There's a lot of syncretism that plays in with the imagery of Valhalla. It doesn't necessarily mean that the imagery of Valhalla is different. One of the interesting takes that I've heard from some of the recon guys is that Valhalla is somewhat metaphorical for the mass grave, the battlefield burial, as it were, for those that fall in battle but can't be carried back home to be laid to rest with the ancestors. Instead of going to the ancestral mound, instead of going to, whatever you want to, the mound, to be returned to the ancestors, the ancestral home, back to their stead, their hem. But instead of being able to do that, they're left on the battlefield, and that is Valhalla, the Hall of the Fallen kind of thing. So anyway, that's it's a deep conversation, and more than I necessarily want to get into here. But I do want to pull into how this plays in with the whole world accepting versus world rejecting philosophy. So within the mound context, and within even the metaphor of Valhalla as battlefield grave, that's still very much focused on this world. That places Valhalla in Midgard, as opposed to, say, in Asgard or something like that. The philosophy that, warriors were striving to die in battle and go to Valhalla as some kind of Viking heaven is heavily colored by later philosophies transposing the idea of heaven, the idea of the sought-after afterlife, the true reality, onto a philosophy and religion and folkway that didn't work that way. This isn't written in binary, so you can't try and apply binary to it. The two don't communicate. It's like, hey, you're running on Heathen OS and you're running on Christian OS, and there's no interface language. There's no exchange there. The two do not speak to one another in this relationship. So when you're going from this OS to this OS, you're having to try and understand that OS, but only within what's within the parameters of your programming. And so that's what we see there. Because a vast majority of what is written down by Christians, or at least by those of Judeo-Christian cultural influence. Whether they were truly Christians themselves or just came from a society that was heavily colored and structured by Judeo-Christian influences. Either way, it doesn't matter, but that's the context from which these stories and myths that we have find their way into writing, into some kind of concrete form that we have access to today. So you see that the stories pertaining to Valhalla are written down by these individuals and put into some kind of codified language and put on paper. And so it's got to go through the filter of their mind before it reaches paper, kind of thing, And so they're going to choose to emphasize things that make more sense to them and choose to let go of things that they don't understand necessarily. They may look at something that was heavily significant to heathens of the time and write it off as insignificant because they don't get it. They don't understand. There's stuff that we wouldn't get. Like heathens looking in on, say, the communion. We wouldn't necessarily conceptually get communion because in some ways we would, in some ways we wouldn't, but if we were looking in on it, we would say, well, what are they sacrificing? Because that's the context that we're coming from. It's like, okay, well, what's the sacrifice here? This is the impartment of the blessing. What did they sacrifice, etc., etc., etc.? There are correlations in there, but I'm not getting into that right now because that's not important to the point. The point is that because of this disconnect of understanding, Valhalla gets recorded into history as this vaunted heaven of warriors and gets given a great deal of focus. But is that necessarily within proportion to how the arch-heathens looked at things? Don't know. I'm not an arch-heathen, couldn't tell you. I can tell you from what I've seen in the Eddas and Sagas, there are some mentions of Valhalla, some specific mentions, especially in the Voluspa area, kind of stuff like that, some of the cosmology elements. But there's not necessarily a whole lot of mentions of die in battle and go to Valhalla within the sagas. I mean, if that's the pervading philosophy of life, if they were seeking rejection of this world and seeking Valhalla in the next, don't you think that would have been mentioned as some kind of motivator at some point in time with these individuals? Don't you think in some of the battle scenes in the Eddas and in the sagas, the Icelandic sagas and Heimskringla and things like that, Saga of the Jomsvikings, don't you think there would be a little bit more emphasis placed on this if this was how the heathens of the time thought? What I'm saying is, Valhalla imagery, of course, does exist. Valhalla is a thing within the context of arch-heathens. I have only done some of the research on it because I'm not warrior caste and it's not a main focus for me. That's not my goal. My goal is to go into the mound. So, I do constantly look at things regarding Valhalla, but there's a lot more that I have to do before I could confidently speak on how I feel this is fully integrated in what it means. Because I do also feel that within the concept of the soul complex, the gods are able to pull aspects of the soul complex where they choose. And if it serves Odin's purposes, in preparation for Ragnarok and the end of times and Twilight of the Gods, then it makes sense to me that he might pull the vital essence of some souls towards a Valhalla type place in order to prepare for that battle, and that it would exist across time and space because sacred time exists outside of it, etc., etc., etc. Anyway, that's not the point of this video. The world accepting versus world rejecting influences the imagery that we have regarding Valhalla because there is this world rejecting coloring of it. They look at this world being, it's just what you go through in order to earn your place in Valhalla. That's the focus. You got to live your life looking for a way to die in battle and go to Valhalla. You don't want to die the straw death. You want to go to the golden halls of Odin and sit and feast with warriors, etc., etc. Sure, if you're warrior caste, absolutely. But that's looking at it from a world-rejecting philosophy versus a world-accepting philosophy, which is, I fight not because I need to get into Valhalla. I keep my sword at my side not because I seek Valhalla, but because I seek to protect my family. I seek to protect my life in this world because I am not guaranteed anything on the other side. We don't know for certain what's on the other side, but we do know what's here, and this is the prime existence. This is what we're here for. So from a world-accepting philosophy, the motivations behind things are different because the focus and impetus are different. They're here versus there. Our motivators are here in this world. Our motivators are here in this life. I seek to gain acceptance with the gods and to exchange gifts with them and to have good, strong relationships with them. Why? Because I want them to bless me and my tribe with luck in this life, because this is what we have. Okay? Christians need to garner the favor of their God in order to gain access to heaven. I know that's an oversimplification and not actually how all of that plays out. But again, not Christian, never have been, so I don't... Anyway, the gist is that the focus of where we're headed and where our value is placed is different. Theirs is in the afterlife, ours is in this life. The impetus, the motivators behind things are different. Because for us, the motivator is entirely here in this world. It's immediate, it's practical, it's pragmatic. We need to succeed in our existence here because that is nothing. Why be good now? Because this is what you've got. yeah, I want to go into hall, I want to go into the mound and sit at feast with my ancestors, but I want them to tell good stories about me while I'm here, because this is the only time I get to make stories. My ancestors aren't still here making stories. I'm telling their stories. I want somebody to tell my story when I go on, because I'm not guaranteed anything on the other side of that. I'm not going to be influencing the world in the same way. I'm just going to be a spectator at that point, and I kind of want to be in the game while I'm in the game. You know, that kind of thing? So it's a thing of where the eyes are focused, you know? In a world-accepting religion, the eyes are looking around at the world around us. At a world-rejecting religion, the eyes are focused on the next life and not seeing the world around, you know? This is the world around them is the vantage point from which they look upon that which they seek. And so they're rejecting this world and accepting that world as reality. And this world is just the staging ground for them to get to that reality. There's a number of different religions that fall into the world rejecting side, a number that fall into the world accepting side. You'll find a lot of the neo-pagan kind of beliefs and the ancient pagan beliefs fall into the world accepting, significantly because that's just where we are. Native American philosophies and religions, from what I've seen, from the experience that I've had with them, largely fall into that world accepting kind of category. So it varies depending on region. It depends on the people, the culture. But in the end, it boils down to where the eyes are looking, where the focus is, what the motivators are. And you got to keep in mind, guys, I am boiling down what is a little bit more complex kind of theology, philosophy, terminology into something that's more approachable on a YouTube channel. So at least I'm trying to. It's not 100%, but I am attempting to boil this down into a more approachable fashion. So hopefully this has made some sense, and you get kind of an idea of what the difference between the two is and what that means, you know. What it means to you today, as far as what do you do with this information, that's really up to you. I would say utilize this information to think about where you actually stand on things. Because I will tell you that there's a large Heathenry was a world-accepting religion. It is a world-accepting religion. The influences of world rejection onto Heathenry are syncretic from the outside. I know I'm dropping jargon now, but they are outside influences that are kind of a taint in the well of Heathenry, and that Heathenry in its purest form in the arch-heathen times was very much world-accepting, very world here now. Not a whole lot of focus on the afterlife necessarily. Seemingly so. There is focus. There were funerary rites, the whole 9 yards. So they had complex thought regarding the afterlife, but the focus seemed to be only here and now. Okay? So world accepting versus world rejecting. Look at your own beliefs and practices. Look at where you feel like world rejection philosophies have influenced your overall paradigm of heathenry, and figure out what you actually think and what you actually believe. All right? I'm not going to tell you to go through and staunchly adhere to world accepting philosophies, but I will tell you this. If you figure out for your own self where you fall on this, where do you fall? Do you accept that this world is the reality and the world in which we need to find and be our best, because this is our reality? We need to find our place within it. We need to live the best life we can here, because that's what it is. You know, this is the true life. Or do you feel like you're working towards some true life in the afterlife, some kind of eternal life on the other side, or ascension to a higher plane, or whatever? Figure out where you stand on it. I'm very much on the world accepting side. I don't really fully get, I get them from a conceptual standpoint, the world rejecting side. But like, I don't really get it, you know what I mean? I understand it philosophically, I understand it academically, I understand it logistically. I'm just a world accepting kind of guy. So that's where my philosophy lies. And I go through and I look at the lore and I look and see, well, this is very heavy, world rejection kind of philosophical influences here, and I'm thinking there's probably some heavy syncretism going on with whatever myth or story that I'm reading here, which means there's probably some heavy Christian influence in this, outside of just simply substituting names of gods or, forcibly entering the name of the church kind of thing. That's the kind of thing where you look at it and go, this has probably been put through somebody's filter. And so I need to look at this and see if I can see from their description what the guy on the other side was probably thinking, It's like, all right, it's like there's a guy who's sitting here drawing and writing down his description of a guy on the other side of the river who's standing there looking into the water, okay? And you come from the same village as the guy looking in the water, but the guy who's drawing the picture and writing things down comes from a different country, okay? You cannot talk to the guy down by the river, but you've got some contextual ideas on what he might be doing down there. You've got some general guesses as to what he might be up to or what he might be thinking. I'm not saying that you know the guy, but I'm saying that, you know enough about the context from which he comes to know that, well, that's a prime fishing spot. He may be looking for fish, or, that's upstream, so he may be looking for some water. Or, the guy may be thinking, about skipping rocks. I don't know. I don't care. Whatever. The guy who's writing it and drawing is going to look at the guy and write down that the guy is contemplating jumping in the river because he's staring blankly into this river, and there is some existential ennui, and he just wants to let the world go. He doesn't understand because he doesn't understand what's going on inside that guy's head. We as onlookers who come from a similar village as that guy understand what he might be doing, but the only thing, we can't see him. All we can see is this guy's picture and description. So we're trying to gather from this what he might be doing down there. That's modern heathens through the lore to ancient heathens. We're looking at the descriptions given by the lore, and we're trying to use the context and understanding that we have of the time to figure out what they were thinking and what they were doing back then, through the lens of these guys who wrote it down. Anyway, their view is going to be heavily influenced by world-rejected philosophies, and so this is a tool you can use to help build your philosophies and help build your understanding. That's how you can apply this to modern heathenry. That's how you can take all of this, the rambling stuff that we've done today, and you can look at it and say, okay, I can take this and do something with it. What can I do? I can reevaluate the lore as I go through it and read it again. I can reevaluate the sagas when I go through them. I can look and see, hey, that's probably got some heavy Christian influence because there's a heavy focus here on the afterlife, or there's a heavy focus here on getting my sword and dying in battle and blah, 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 blah. Not always, but it is a tool in the toolbox. Is this the Master King? No, not by any means. But it is one element of the heathen worldview. People tell me frequently that, hey, why don't you do a video on the heathen worldview? That would be great. Describe the heathen worldview. Do you know why they want me to describe the heathen worldview? Because they don't have the heathen worldview, and they want to assimilate that into themselves. Got news for you, folks. You can't do that in a video. Because if you take the whole summation of my entire channel and pour it into your head, you got about that much of this heathen's worldview. There is no arch heathen worldview, but there are some generalities that constitute generically heathen worldview. There's just not one particular one. Anyway, I can't infuse it into you, and I certainly can't do that within one 30-minute video because it's a view of the world, full context, and world accepting versus world rejecting is a part of worldview. It is an essential part, a building block in a lot of ways of core values within a worldview. And you have a stance on this. You don't know what it is yet, necessarily. Some of you do, because you've thought about it. Some of you have never heard this term before in your lives and haven't even remotely thought of it. And this is your chance. This is your chance. If you figure out where you fall on the world accepting versus world rejecting side of things, you will understand why some of your values are the way they are. You will understand why you think the way you do on certain things, and it will help you going forward to further build your philosophies and understanding in the world. It will help you be the better you, because you will better understand the building blocks of your own philosophies and psyche. So anyway, I hope that helped, guys. I hope that I could boil that weird abstractness down into something that's somewhat approachable, because it is difficult to understand in some ways. At least it's easy to explain when you boil it down to just like that definition, but the full application of it is fairly abstract. And so if you just define terms, you lose the importance of those terms. And these are some important terms that need to be understood and need to be explored in some detail, because that's some fairly significant building block stuff. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate your support. I appreciate everything you guys do. It means the world to me. Please stay tuned. We'll have more coming your way. As long as you guys continue to like the videos, share them around, everything like that, I will continue to make them. So thank you. Hail. May your hearth fires burn bright. My hair's a mess. Hair's a mess. Alright, this is the world accepting versus world rejecting philosophy video. So, we'll get into this and see. Alright. Now, fun and games. Alright. Silly stuff. This has been a long and crazy couple of weeks. Because it's been about 2 weeks since I filmed last, because I do these in batches, you guys know. And it has been stupid, busy. Holy monkeys, everything has turned on its head. I am barely able to slide this one in here. And I'm hoping that I can before I get interrupted. We'll see. I can't make any guarantees. So I adjust the keys on my belt because they're hanging wrong. Okay. I don't want to make noise during the video. So anyway, all right. Let's try this again, shall we? I say again the first time. This is the first cut. So onwards and upwards. A little shot of coffee. And then let's talk heathen stuff. And we're ready in 3, 2, 1. Let's jam. You know what? Hold on. Pause. Bad intro. Bad intro. It's not really a bad intro. It's that I don't like the camera angle. I haven't moved anything. Why would my camera angle be bad all of a sudden? It feels like it's looking up. Okay, well, angle outwards a little bit. Slowly so that I can... Okay, cool. Let's try this again. Crazy. All right. I only got so much space in my office. It's really tight. So, you know, as long as I'm not falling over things, I'll be okay. All right, let's try this again. 3, 2, 1, let's jam. If you have something such as like Hinduism with their reincarnation throughout towards, you know, well, their goals. Pause. No. Not the Hinduism. Let's do the whole Buddhist thing. Ready? In 3, 2, 1, let's jam. Now you'll hear some people, especially those that have some background in theocracy, theology, stuff like that. Theology. Now let's not misuse terminology here. While you think it's funny, everybody else is going to be like, dude. Anyway, theocracy. All right, back at 3, 2, 1, let's jam.